Hello and welcome to the BYU Family History Library webinar series. We're glad you could join us today. I'm Bryant and I'll be your host for this webinar. Please make sure your microphones and web cameras are disabled during the presentation to provide for a smooth recording. If you have technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box and I can address your concerns. You are welcome to use the chat box during the webinar for comments and insights. However, all questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Our next webinar is next week at the same time, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m., How to Repair Incorrect Merges in Family Tree with Catherine Grant. If you would like to access a previous webinar, please visit our webinar index on our website or search on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars are recorded and uploaded by the following Monday for your convenience. We also post links to recordings and other updates on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. For today's webinar, we are pleased to hear from Breanne Ballard, who will be giving a presentation on raising family historians, how to capture the hearts of future genealogists. Breanne Ballard is a wife, mother of 5, a registered nurse, and an avid family historian. She married her wonderful husband over 10 years ago, and they have 5 amazing kids. She graduated from the BYU College of Nursing in 2007 and worked in labor and delivery for 7+ years. Breanne began learning about genealogy as a child, enjoyed learning about it in college, and became passionate about it in 2014. She believes in the power of family connections and that family history is for everyone. As such, she loves teaching others about the joy that is genealogy. One such teaching outreach is done with her friend Kimberly and their website, genealogypals.com. And we're excited to have Breanne with us today. And if you're ready, Breanne, we'll turn the time over to you.
All right, sounds good. Let me just share my screen and we'll get started. All right, there we go. Okay, so I am so happy to be here tonight, you guys. This is one of my favorite topics. It's one of the marriage of 2 of my favorite things, kids and family history. I'm a homeschool mom, so I also have tried to kind of draw in some of the things that I've learned through teaching my kids and educational philosophies that I've used throughout the years. But the most important thing is I try to make all these things easy to do. Since I have 5 kids, I don't have a lot of extra time, and I don't think any of us have a lot of extra time. So especially since it's so important, I really want to try and make these things as easy as possible. I'm going to share some examples of things that I've done, but I just want you to know that it's that they're really meant to spark your own ideas and hopefully help you get some ideas that you can do with in your own home or with any of the children that you are involved with. I really believe that the key to raising family historians is through a child's heart. The way to reel them in is to help them have emotional, meaningful connections with their family and their ancestors. I want you to think for a second about what hooked you. What was your experience? How did you get into family history? What is getting you on the path to learning more about your family history, if that's your case? But I'd be willing to bet at some point you had a connection, an emotional connection, an avid curiosity about a certain ancestor, a story, a photo, a keepsake, something that really hooked you and got you excited. And those are the kind of things that we are looking for to help our kids get excited about it as well. So the big question is why? Before we get into the hows, I want to help you understand why this is so important and something that you should be doing with the children in your lives. Teaching youth family history can be extremely intellectually and emotionally beneficial. And these benefits have actually been widely studied. There is a handout. I'm not sure how you'll be getting that, but I do have a handout that has a list of the studies that I've come across. I wish we could get into more depth in all of them, but I wanted you to be aware of what they are and where you could find them if you want to know more. But again, these are things that studies have shown to be beneficial when you're teaching your kids about their family history. So one of the benefits is resilience. Studies have shown that a child who knows their family history can be more resilient. Webster defines this as the act of leaping or springing back or the act of rebounding. And I love all of those words. They're very, very visual to help you understand this concept that a child who is more resilient has a greater capacity to snap back, to overcome it, to rebound from the anxieties, the pains that they're feeling. And it's, like I said, it's just such an important skill to have and a common problem that youth experience these days. This happens in part because the telling of family stories can help give their lives context and even give them a good example of how to or not to overcome adversity and give them a bigger perspective. Another one of the benefits is it helps them develop an intergenerational identity or self. Big word, but it really means a self that is defined as much by one's place in a familiar history as a personal past. In other words, understanding your place within the context of the rest of your family. So it's not just about your personal story, but it's understanding that your story comes from a whole long line of stories of the family members that have come before you. This is great, especially for adolescents who kind of have a tendency to look inward. And it can help them create something called generativity. Generativity is something that we actually, it's a psychological term that gets used more often when you're talking about later adulthood, but it's something that adolescents can develop as well. And it basically is your concern about your ability to, or your desire to be able to help and influence the world around you. Again, so another sense of the bigger picture rather than the inward. We're helping these youth look outward. Another really important thing that family history and genealogy can help children with, and youth, and all of us, in fact, is something called genealogical consciousness, which is just a big word, essentially to say a greater respect for others. Amy Harris, a BYU professor, gave an awesome speech at BYU a few years ago that talks just about this. And she talks about how when we focus on our family history and we focus on our own family, sometimes it can lead to like an exclusionary way of thinking. We're thinking about our family and not the families around us. But is when we think about genealogical consciousness, it will help us overcome this. She said, genealogical consciousness, on the other hand, doesn't just avoid these pitfalls, it prevents them. It has the power to obliterate them, to completely dissolve the destructive boundaries between us and them, to starkly remind us that there is no them and there is only us, and to pull people together despite differences. Genealogical consciousness is a way of being, a way of thinking about your place within and responsibility to the generations surrounding you. It holds a promise to erode racism and sexism, to reduce to rubble centuries of hatred and discrimination, to bind us together when all other ways of connecting only seem to drive us farther apart. And when I read that, I thought, man, isn't that what the world is looking for right now? Isn't that what we want to see in our families? And again, developing this genealogical consciousness is a great way to do that. DNA is a great tool to teach this. Diane Southard, in a webinar I watched recently, talked about an experience she had teaching some African American young women about their family history through DNA tests. They each took a DNA test, and as she's explaining to them how this works, they were comparing their haplogroups, which is the way to see kind of their deep ancestry, and they were all from a similar haplogroup. And as she's explaining how this works, one of the young women said, it means we're sisters. And they felt that connection, that even though they were from different families, we are really all part of a big human family. And again, a very important message for today's modern world. So if we want our youth to develop these qualities and characteristics, what do? So there's two goals that I want you to keep in mind. The first is create a family narrative. So a narrative is an account of connected events or a story. You're telling the stories that illustrate what your family is all about. One of the most popular studies done on the effects of family history on youth was done by Emory University. It was called the Do You Know study, and they had a list of 20 questions that they asked these young people. And the ones who answered the most or knew the most of these questions were shown to be the most resilient. But I think it's really interesting that the authors of this study were very quick to point out that it wasn't the answers to these specific questions that made the difference. It was showing that these families were good at creating a narrative and sharing these stories. So I actually do have a link in that same handout to the 20 questions if you want to know what they are. But again, the answers weren't what was important. The most important thing was, again, that narrative. I also thought it was interesting that if you look at all those questions, they're all questions that concern personal history, your parents' history, and your grandparents. So those of you that maybe don't know a whole lot about your ancestors or your family history, you can still get these benefits just by sharing the stories that you do know of those closer generational relationships. The second goal is to capture their hearts. Aristotle is supposed to have said, educating the mind without the heart is no education at all. And that's something that I've found completely to be true. Helping them build emotional connections with you and with their ancestors are extremely important. I would choose to emphasize qualities and characteristics over dates and places. Again, these youth need to become familiar in a way that they can understand and remember. And I don't think they really, sometimes they remember dates and places, but again, it's more about those emotional connections and qualities and characteristics. So now that we've talked about why it's important and what our goals are, we have this vision of what we want to see. We're going to talk about some teaching methods, how we're going to get this done. The first is you're going to tell them their story. People have been using stories to teach lessons and pass on knowledge since the beginning of time. It's a critical way of helping children know their family narratives and capture their hearts. And the best news is that it's easy. If you can just pull out of your brain a story when the situation arises, it's so easy, and it's powerful and extremely beneficial. Stories have the power to help youth develop empathy. They can step into the story and empathetically feel what it may have felt like, and also feel the consequences of those experiences that their family members have had, and experience them without actually living them. So they learn the lesson, but they didn't actually have to go through it. And it helps them develop this empathy. This also helps them build a framework to help them understand the world around them. And a story can create emotional bonds. Think of the last time you heard an emotionally charged story and the effect it had on you. My favorite example of this is a TED Talk. We've all seen TED Talks, and they all start out with a powerful, amazing, emotionally charged story. And that helps lead us into wanting to know more about what their topic is. So if we can do that with our kids, it's incredible, especially if we can tell them stories that they can really relate to. For example, kids used to be mean to me at school too. This is what I did about it, or this is what I wish I had done about it. Again, building those relationships and a relatable story, something that they can connect to. Also, stories can help you have a better influence on youth. Studies have shown that if between a storyteller and a listener, they've measured the brain waves of each, and they actually sync up a little bit. So you can help them feel what you're feeling by telling them the story. And storytelling also releases chemicals in the brain, dopamine, that help reduce stress and increase happy feelings. And it helps these stories be stored in the brain in a way that's much easier to be retained. So even if youth don't really get into their family history, if you've told them those stories enough, they'll be there for when it's beneficial for them to remember those stories. Just a couple more tips. Be age appropriate. So a story that you will tell a young child is different than the one you'll tell for an older adolescent. Keep it short. One scene from an ancestor's life is much better than a long biographical sketch. Add details. Give it a little bit of dramatic flair. Give it context to help them understand. I also like to create a little suspense. So I will start to tell a story and the characters don't have names. And then once they're kind of hooked, then I like to reveal the person's name, especially if it's somebody that they know. And then they're like, oh my goodness, that was Grandma so-and-so. So a little suspense is also great. And then repeat, repeat, repeat. I would rather tell one good story multiple times than have a lot of stories that only get told once. The next suggestion I have is teach by example. Youth will understand what's important to you by the way you spend your time. If you want it to be important to them, you've got to be doing it yourself. Let them see you doing it. If I can see that we haven't been talking about our family history a whole lot lately, or my kids haven't shown a lot of interest, I will just grab my laptop and go sit on my couch in my living room. And next thing I know, there are little eyes looking at me from behind, trying to check in on my screen. A lot of times they'll have questions, or sometimes they'll ask to do their own activities with their own laptops. And this is also how you're gonna learn all these stories. Again, this is your example. If you want to have stories to tell, you have to know the stories. So you're cramming these stories into your brain so you have them when you're ready for them. You're also gonna want to create experiences. Help those life. This is especially important for attention span issues. We all know the younger generation, it takes more to get them engaged and interested. And it's a little bit challenging at times, but by creating experiences or helping them connect with things, that will help them engage in the stories. Take them on field trips. I love field trips. Cemeteries are a big deal thing for me. I love to go visit cemeteries with my kids. I try to make it light and meaningful, hopefully to help overcome that stigma that they're creepy or weird. If you don't have any relatives nearby, take them to see maybe if someone famous near you has been buried there. Just go and enjoy and help them notice interesting pictures or shapes on the headstones, unique names that they see. Just create that environment for them that's a reverent, good place, not creepy place to be. And remember to teach them to be respectful in that area. Family landmarks. Take them to places that are special. This is a picture of my kid, a few of my kids, a few of my nieces and my nephew. We took them to see the house where my grandma was born. Their great grandma was born. It was actually just behind that window that she was born. And so they got to be there and hear that story from her, which actually took place on August 5th. And I won't say what year or how old she is, but happy birthday to my grandma today. So that was a really special experience to have with my kids. Again, any family place that's memorable to you and your family are great places to visit. Cultural festivals, if you're not totally sure about certain places, if you don't feel like you have a lot of places, or just in general, go to local cultural events. If you know you have Scottish heritage, then those are good places to be that celebrate that culture. If you are too far away, there are always virtual options, which are great. Google Earth, Google Maps. You can save places and addresses you find in your research or that you know through your own personal history in Google Maps or Google Earth, and then choose the street view to see what it's like now. Maybe it is the same as it was before, or maybe it's a little bit different, but you can see that with the street view. Google Earth also has a new feature that you can create a sightseeing tour. So you can save multiple places and you can add your own pictures and text and create a story that way to see these important places from your family tree. Find a Grave and Billion Graves are virtual cemetery websites. You may be able to see headstones of your ancestors virtually that way. And YouTube is a big one. I feel like I can find anything I want on YouTube. Videos on places, plants, things, dances, cultural experiences, anything can really be found on YouTube. And then everyday objects can also be a great way to make connections with your family and your ancestors. Foods. One night I was cutting up beets and decided to tell my daughter all about how my great grandpa was a beet farmer and my grandma would spend lots of time with her family in the beet fields. Plants. I gave my mom a currant bush for Mother's Day because we have an ancestor who loved currants and making currant jam, and she was really big into flowers and flower gardens. So some of the flowers that she planted in her garden, we've chosen to put in our own flower beds. Anything really can become a reminder of a family story. Just get a little creative and make those connections to help remind your kids when they see those things of what it means and what it's all about. Kids learn so well sometimes if you just get out of their way and let them explore. Help them be in the driver's seat. One of my favorite things about family history is that there are so many different aspects of it and different specialties. Some are good at research and writing, observation. Let them try out different things to see what catches their interest. Help them explore their tree to see which branches of their tree they're most interested in and the people that they show a natural curiosity about. Two of my favorite ways to do this, if you have access to Ancestry, that's a great one. I allow them to build their own family tree. I set it to private. I make a new tree and set it to private, and then let them just go crazy with hints, which might make a few of you cringe because that's a little, there's accuracy issues with that, and just be aware of that. But to be honest, I feel like I can fix those later. I am more than happy to just let them click away, and kids love buttons. So let them click, let them follow where they go. And it also helps them automatically kind of ask questions. And that's a great opportunity for you to either research it together or tell them the story that you know that goes with that. Family search is also really great. It's free. And since it's one big family tree, it's pretty easy to find things that have been contributed by other people that you didn't know about yourself. But you do have to be careful. Since it is one big family tree, it's easy for them to mess with things. So especially with the younger kids, you have to watch over their shoulder or click for them. I've requested it. I would really love to see Family Search have a view only option for these kids so they can really just get into the memories tab, the tree, and just explore without that worry of they're going to mess anything up. So that's my thing about Family Search. But again, another great option to help your kids just explore and see what they want to see. Couple last minute ideas and suggestions. I like to focus on my first 3 to 4 generations. You can go beyond that, but especially those first 3 to 4 generations are important because they're likely people that your kids already know, or the parents of people that your kids know in real life. Holidays are an awesome way to incorporate family history and stories. You can also make up your own family holidays, celebrate ancestor birthdays, anniversaries, any holiday that you would like to make up. And it doesn't have to be a big production to celebrate it. Just do something or make a food, something that helps you remember and connect to that ancestor for the day. The last thing I wanted to say is I know I'm not naive to the fact that that not all family trees are perfect. And there are unpleasant stories out there in family trees and things that you definitely want to take into consideration how you want to share that with your kids. But I encourage you, when you feel it's important, I wouldn't shy away from those stories. When it's an age appropriate time and you feel they're ready, I think those stories are also really beneficial to share. So don't forget those as well. And that is what I have for you. Thank you so much. I've been so happy to be here and share a few ideas with you. And now's the time. If you have any questions, Bryant will help me know what your questions are, and I'll see if I can get you some answers.
Awesome. Thanks, Breanne. Yes, as Breanne mentioned, if any of the audience members have questions, please post them in the chat box and she can answer them for us.
You also can email me if you would rather email me a question at genealogypals@gmail.com. That's another great way to get in touch with me, and feel free.
Okay, looks like we have a question. Oh, not a question, a comment from Peter Thorne. He says, if you want to let your kids play with your family search, open it in beta mode.
Oh, I had never thought about that. And to be honest, I'm not super techie, but I know my husband could help me with that. Thank you so much for that suggestion. Again, because that's just so important. There's so much there, but it's just so hard when you have to cringe and worry that they're going to mess something up.
And we have another comment from B4. It says, get visual, have kids take photos and videos of a family.
Take videos and, sorry, say that again.
Oh, have kids take photos and videos of your family.
Yes, journaling, like a video or a photo journal, is awesome. I love that idea. helping them tell their story, again, through different mediums. There's so many different mediums nowadays to share these stories: pictures, photos, blogs, videos. There's an blog, endless supply of technology that you can use to share stories. Thank you. I like that.
And it looks like we do have a question. It says, did you ever use a family tree for the kids to fill in on paper?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of really good structured activities. I love exploration, but yeah, there are definitely tons of awesome resources on paper, activities. The BYU Family History Technologies Lab, I think that's what it's called. They have awesome games that you can play. There are lots of structured activities out there that are great for kids. Filling out their family tree on a paper. If you Google search family tree for kids, you'll find tons of templates for those out there.
Peter also suggests both the Church Family Search and Family History Guide have extensive ideas for family activities.
Yes, definitely. I've seen Facebook groups. They do have a Facebook group too. Instagram pages. Lots and lots of resources out there. Thank you.
And it looks like we have a question. It says, can non-members have an account on Family Search?
Yes, absolutely. So the only thing you don't see when you are not a member are the temple dates and information on those that aspect of it. But yes, absolutely, non-members are more than welcome to be on Family Search. We love what non-members have to contribute to Family Search. And kids can have Family Search accounts too, starting at 8, I believe it is. And like I said, that's the conundrum, is they can have an account when they're 8, but I know my 8-year-old wasn't quite ready to be free on Family Search when he turned 8 years old and got his account. So there's that time frame where they're not quite ready for it, but they can have an account.
All right. If that is all the questions, then that will be the end of the presentation today.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Breanne. And let me just put up the schedule again. Hope you're able to join us next week on the 12th, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. How to repair incorrect merges in Family Tree. And that'll be with Catherine Grant. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thank you once again, Breanne, for this great presentation. And we hope everyone has a great day.